Well, on an episode of Monday Night Raw, where a whole lot did actually happen, a lot of news was made, a lot of matches were set, a lot of people entered into the Royal Rumble, declared themselves for the Royal Rumble. Transfers were all over the place. The transfer window was open. But perhaps after all of that, the biggest news on Raw tonight was, that it ended. It ended early, ended a half hour earlier than most of us are used to. As always, on Monday night, I am Rob. This is the Nocturnal Knockout, a brass ring media podcast right here on the One True Sport YouTube channel. For the second week in a row, Raw was Netflix. And for the second week in a row, I am joining you here to break down everything that happened on this shortened edition of Monday Night Raw. We heard about this a while back that the length of the shows could be a little bit variable. Now, knowing everything we know from the past, whenever we hear that a wrestling company has control over the amount of time they can use, usually they go in excess. It is over and over and over. That is how wrestling companies like to do things. However, right now in the Netflix era, things are a little bit different. And if Raw needs to be as long as Raw needs to be, apparently that's as long as Raw is going to be. I think Triple H made the mention of an average a couple of weeks ago. Well, let's see where we're at now. We had barely an overrun last week into a post show, and now we had a show that was a nice, tidy 2.5 hours. A show where a lot of things occurred, including, as Eddie is pointing out in the chat, we have the inaugural Women's Intercontinental Championship. We have the ends of a few feuds. We have a few feuds getting reignited, and we have a massive, massive field building up for the Royal Rumble. Say what you want about the Royal Rumble, but right now, as it stands on January 13th, the Rumble is loaded with star power, like real main event type of talent, filling out about the first half of the Rumble. And obviously, there's going to be more. We are early on. So we got to see how this all fills out. Speaking of filling out, it's nice to see the chat filling up. What's up, Maria? Congratulations to Lyra. And you guys seem like you're very into Raw tonight. What was it about Raw that really made it a great show tonight for those of you who are declaring it as a great show? I would say whether or not your reaction to this Raw was positive, whether or not it was negative, I think one thing is clear. This was, for all intents and purposes, the real debut of Raw on Netflix. Like, I know it was last week, and that was the gimmick of the whole week, but it was a blowout show. Even if I saw some of the reaction to the show was a little tepid, I thought last week on this show we had pretty high praise for the show. We considered it a positive show, but I think people were disappointed maybe last week with the platform on which this show was presented, what was delivered, and we even talked about how few matches there were. This was the first real Raw on Netflix. This was a regular show. This was a water level show. And for the most part, most of Raw, with the exception of the runtime, looked like Raw as you would know it. It had the normal pacings of a Raw, just a tad bit shorter. Now, it messes with your expectations just a little bit, I have to say. Being a little bit shorter, you're sort of looking what's going to happen, what's going to come out. You're used to those segments. That is a absolute positive, I think, because one of the things that gets old is being able to time out if you have an epic main event coming up, or if you have an angle coming up because there's 5 minutes left in entrances. Or you can really see stalling when they're coming out there. Good to see that might not be as much of a factor. Well, right, Mike. Obviously, we remember when Raw was only 2 hours. And I know you're talking about the most recent Raws, but then we were expanded back out. We also got the news of SmackDown, maybe not necessarily staying at 3 hours, which is good all the way around. Because I can't think of another thing that factors into the enjoyment of wrestling shows these days than, quite frankly, the length. I was thinking about that as we were watching SmackDown on Friday, and it was something that was definitely hurt by the show's runtime. Now there was a lot that I would say happened on this show, but a lot of it was cut into uh segment smaller segments throughout the evening. So you had it a little more compact. And there's some stuff maybe that we've blown by, and we're gonna go through it, and we'll break a lot of it down. But I think the other big news, you had the IC, the new IC champ. You had the big win in the main event from Damian Priest. You had all the announcements of the Royal Rumble entrance, but you also finally, once and for all, had the debut of Penta. After all the teasing and the subtle hints and the speculation, it finally happened tonight. The worst kept secret ever, as Michael Cole made a mention of. Made a mention at the commercial break as someone who engenders fear. So really doing it where they were laying it on really, really thick. And we'll talk a little bit about the match that Gable and Penta had. But this is the Nocturnal Knockout Raw post show for January 13th, 2025, for this edition of Monday Night Raw. If Roman, Seth, Punk, and Cody retire from WWE, which opponents must retire them? I don't know. That would be a lot of different unique ones. I wonder if it was something like who their gimmick was that they kept retiring them. I don't know. All those guys except for Punk are basically about the same age. So I think there's actually going to be a lot more mileage left on a lot of those guys. We'll talk about Penta versus Jax. At first, I could see some people not really feeling it. Even our friend Zach Hader, and I was seeing him over on X. He wasn't feeling that so much. And then as it went on, I think largely there was praise for the match. So before we get into it, we'll take our traditional swig. It looks like we got some ginger ale, as always. Last can in the fridge, we're going to have to refill. The unofficial drink of the Brass Ring Media podcast. Not any one specific brand of ginger ale, just ginger ale in general. So let's kick it off. Talk about Raw, break it down. What's up, Fernando? Good to see that you liked Raw. Get in on the chat, just like all of you guys are doing. If you have something kind of interesting, kind of unique, don't worry. Just go ahead and send that chat on our way, and we'll see where we can fit it into the show. Otherwise, kind of just burn down Raw, mostly segment by segment, making little comments and here and there, but we'll talk about some of the different things that happen on this show. And the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? As we have the age-old favorite, the opening promo. But in this case, we had someone that was seemingly a welcome sight for Raw fans as CM Punk came out. Big ovation. CM Punk, of course, man of the people these days, coming off his big win over Seth Rollins. And he was out there essentially to declare that, we'll talk about that maybe in a little bit, Redneck, to declare that he was entering himself into the Royal Rumble, which is probably not a shock at all. He did his whole gimmick, as he talked about in the past, but maybe pointing to the sign, even though there was no sign out there. All of these sort of really well-worn tropes by CM Punk. Easy for me to say. He comes out there, and the person he addressed is the other person who had most vehemently declared for the Rumble the week before, in John Cena. Made mention that he can see him. He always had. And then, of course, he was interrupted by Seth Rollins. Because just like SmackDown, apparently no one on this show can quit each other either. Everyone is just rehashing the same stuff over and over and over again. And I thought it was rich that Seth came out and addressed how much he loses and how much he's been losing in all the matches he doesn't win. Regardless, he was going to be in the Rumble. He's going to make his case. He's going to main event WrestleMania. Poor guy. I'm thinking of Seth. Of all the guys that are in that like main event slot on the top of the card that are in the big matches, he is the perennial loser out of all of them by a mile. And of course, if you have these guys out there, there's no way that Drew couldn't come out there and join the fracas. I mean, again, these people have been mad at each other forever, to the point that they even kind of made mention of it in the promo, as Punk mentioned, that he is out of patience. Ultimately, this leads to all of them being announced for the Rumble, and later on in the night, we get the announcement for next week of Seth Rollins versus Drew McIntyre on Raw. So that seems to be the big match that we're building to next week that we'll be on here talking about and breaking down. This segment wasn't an overly long opening promo. I made some notes about this. This was as tidy as you can get. It wasn't one of those kind of opening promos where he came out and everyone interrupts each other to set up the main event. We had some of those a little more recently. That was not the case here. This was more a crisp. Everyone sort of announced their presence into the Rumble, and for as for what we saw on here, it was the last time that we saw Punk for the night, and kind of closed out this section of the show. But as I mentioned earlier, if you just take what we got so far, Roman Reigns, John Cena, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, CM Punk, among others, that's a pretty stacked field where you can make a case for a lot of people winning. And this is a year where I think you need a lot of that. We've had a lot of years of a thread of WrestleMania that we've been going through, and maybe it's time to break free from that somewhat, but it still has to fit within the parameters of what we're doing. I don't think we get Punk and Cena at WrestleMania, to be honest with you. Both Seth and Drew are coming up big losses. Very interesting to see who takes it. Yeah, and this stuff with Seth, I kind of think they need to get him back on track with victories. Like it is kind of sticking out just how much he loses. Beyond, as much as we know it's already a narrative, I think you have to manage it a little bit. I mean, the guy's not Mick Foley. He can't just lose every match that he's ever been in. Keep the chat going though. Like it. Roman versus Punk, Cody versus Cena. I don't have Cena's opponent figured out for WrestleMania. I just can't seem to stick on that one. I'll definitely take predictions and we'll take them going forward. Yeah, Punk versus Gunther is a hard sell. It's a hard sell for me. I think Roman versus Punk is a match that, like, the way they've just been building, and if you look at the show, like um those two guys are kind of built up regardless of who has titles as the top guys on each show. Not to say like someone like Cody is not protected and all that, but it's Punk and Roman's company right now. If you're watching the shows, Seth versus Gunther, maybe, but you gotta rehab Seth. You gotta do that. All right, but now this actually led into what a lot of people were talking about in the evening. It was Gable versus Penta. You had the lead in. You went into the commercial break, coming back, and of course, to the surprise of absolutely no one, Penta came out. Big pop. California was a good place to do that. We even got the mention of, I believe it was the Lucha Underground title and just pandemonium on X, right? We got a mention of something from Lucha Underground. It's been weird with the rise, I guess you would say, of Penta over. Hold on one second, guys. Technical issues. There we go. I do not eat, but we will talk about that in a little bit. I do not think that is going to happen. So the mention of Lucha Underground though really just drove people nuts on Twitter that the people were mentioning. I think Lucha Underground specifically is just a funny one because I mean we talked about last week how they talked about the end of cable wrestling as something and as wrestling much more so as a TV show than anything else, which, I get it that is what it is, but you know, it's not exactly what it is. And Lucha Underground, it's this weird, I wouldn't say obscure thing, but you had to have been there to know about it. And these guys on these eternal contracts, and there's a lot of guys that I think we only know them because of their Lucha Underground time, or we know them within their Lucha Underground framework. I know obviously Pentagon, we know him a lot from the last couple of years in AEW, in Mexico, all over the place. But like for me, I first got acquainted to him with Lucha Underground. So there's been plenty of Lucha Underground discourse over the last few weeks. Didn't think that would happen in the year of our Lord 2025. Although maybe they were the trial balloon on Netflix, right? They're the ECW on TNN to this Raw. Now, initially, I saw like our friend Zach Haydorn, and I think he made a good point with this, and I see where he was going, but it ended up working out. Where he was kind of looking for maybe a squash match, with the Penta match, and I get that. I was kind of along the same way of thinking, because it was just a little bit. It was a little bit different the way suddenly Gable is presented when he was in this setting. Now, let me say Penta got the win over here with the Penta driver. No one cared at the end of the day who the opponent was, how long the match was, anything like that. This ended up really, really working out because they were very, very much into Penta, and Gable did just enough to kind of keep it going, to kick out. That was the thing, is you were going to have kickouts of some of Penta's big moves, and you're going to have the kickouts as the only way to sort of go forward and keep showing those moves. Reminds me a little bit of when Kevin Owens debuted nearly a decade ago against John Cena, and they went back and forth with the showcase of a lot of the moves that frankly they only recently bust back out within his character. So it was a bit of a tonal shift, I thought, for Gable, and that kind of threw it off just a little bit. But at the end of the day, no one cared. This crowd was very into him, and this match was given plenty of time. That's the one thing with the pacing now on Netflix. Even if it's shorter, stuff is definitely given time. And it's allowed to the point where I was wondering if this was maybe going on too long. Now, has anyone seen, and tell me if it's a legit news source, not just some speculation. I was seeing something earlier on X that maybe Penta with his promo and his match went over. Are you guys seen that? Let me check the old Twitter machine if that is just hearsay or is that something. Trauma time. That's a great name. Great name. Don't even know what's going on with the NFL game. So someone won. Sure. We'll wait to speculate on that again until I can see it. This was a weighty segment though, getting the win over Penta. I think we got the "This is awesome" chant after the first dive out of the ring, and it got a nice pop. What got a really big pop though is what Eddie is saying there in the chat. That was the promo he cut. Sounded, the English portions were really good, and really connected with the fan. But then once he started to mix in a little bit of the Spanish in there, and really got that crowd going, they were into it, and it was one of those kind of promos. What I liked about it is it didn't sound perfect. It didn't sound rehearsed. He was, a little out of breath because the match had just happened. I mean, if I was doing that, if I was flipping around the way he was, I'd be pretty darn out of breath. Regardless of all of that, it is exciting to see him around. Like, that's one of the guys that, again, has been on the radar, been on TV for a long time. Been on mainstream American television. Like, if you had access to Lucha Underground, again, I want to say the show goes back to 2015, 2014, right around there. So that's about a decade of him being on TV. He was on TV a lot with AEW, so a bit of a known quantity. And now there's a whole new roster for him to mix it up with. Hopefully, there's a sibling maybe in the works that could be coming, but who knows? I guess we'd have to cross that bridge when we get there. But he immediately, if he's used often and isn't just shelved and with all those qualifiers, he immediately can add something fresh to really either roster. And I think that was a big thing in the last week, is that these rosters need a little bit of freshening. But we have this transfer portal window that we don't even know what it means. We don't know when people move shows. We don't know why Nia Jax just showed up tonight. We don't know why the commentary had to make note that Nia Jax might not have been on the show. There were a lot of moments like that we have to figure out with this. And let's face it, the brand thing, even now in the Netflix era, I don't know how much they really need it. Overall, though, seems like really positive feedback on the Penta stuff, and the crowd there being into it. I think Sean Rossap of Fightful had noted that they're back to putting the ambient noise in the crowd, so the crowds really have to be popping for you to hear the genuine pop. Backstage, you had Dominic finally been able to confront Liv with some flowers. And he was gonna go park her car and do all kinds of errands. I love the idea of him not thinking that she was upset. And from there, we went into another series that had seemingly been going on for a while. Sheamus and Ludwig Kaiser. Another series that it seems like it's some version of these guys and Braun Breaker have just been mixing it up forever. Sheamus got the win here. Pretty good match. Again, I was wondering, out of this feud, this definitely seems like finally once and for all that Sheamus has come out on top. It does make you wonder where that leaves Kaiser and what his real future is. Is he a guy that puts over other mid-carders? Is that the right role for him? I don't know. I kind of think there might be a little more in him than just that. But this victory did result in the big Braun Breaker shove. Braun Breaker getting the treatment of the guys that are sitting there watching the show. Sheamus and Breaker for the 9,000th time, if that's indeed what they're setting up. If Sheamus actually ever wins this IC title, will people care? Like, will it actually be that big moment, or will they stretch it out so long? At this point, I don't even think they should do it. I think they should just let those sleeping dogs die. But I don't know. If Liv won, he wouldn't have tried to get back. Yeah, it's really this. Yeah, I mean, what's Dominic to do? What is he to do? Kathy Kelly did announce, though, next week it was official. It'll be Seth versus Drew. Seth also ran into Sammy backstage, asked him, Sammy, when he's going to start doing some stuff for himself now that the Ulafala has been returned, which somehow dovetailed into a Gunther promo. Gunther said he watched Raw, like all of us did, and like many of you, he was not impressed with what he saw on Raw. But he was interrupted. He was interrupted by Jey Uso, who, not surprisingly, in San Jose got a huge pop, as he does. Declared himself, putting himself in there after his big win over Drew. Says he's got the stuff out of the way, Solo's out of the way, Drew's out of the way. Time for him to focus on what matters, and what matters is Gunther and his title. Now, a pretty predictable route they went here, but one that I think is resonant is Gunther dismissed Jey as simply a tag team guy, which I think that we have evidence to the contrary of that. But when it really comes down to it, he still is that tag team guy. I know he's been a singles act for a couple of years. I know he gets big pops and big cheers in these single matches. But be honest with yourself. When you think of someone that's gonna win major titles, do you think of Jey Uso? Do you? Or do you think of him as a guy that's kind of cool that he gets to hang out in the main event scene, but he's not really one of the guys? Now, I may be off here. You may have a completely opposite framing of how you think of this guy. You may think of him as simply a main eventer who is uncrowned. Well, we'll see. There was a question earlier about getting the title on him. I don't think so. But he cut the impassioned promo, proving he's going to do it. And that's going to be the match, Saturday night's main event. 2 weeks. So Saturday night's main event Jey Uso. Match made in heaven. For me, and some of you guys might feel different about this, I give, you don't want to see, Candy does not want to see Jey main eventing. He's a bad wrestler. Well, I don't think he's a bad wrestler. I just don't think he's framed as a main event type of wrestler. And it's hard to really take him seriously there. I mean, we've all been wrong in the past. It was a mere 21 years ago. No one in the world at the No Way Out pay-per-view thought little Eddie Guerrero was going to beat Brock Lesnar. But football, the Vikings came a calling, and that's where we ended up with Eddie as champion. So stranger things certainly have happened and do happen, but I don't think this is it here. I think this is just another piece. It's an important piece, but another piece in probably a much larger storyline. It's also a Rumble title match. So, or not a Rumble title match, Saturday night's main event title match. Does it go to the Rumble? We'll see. Where are you guys with that though? Are you guys able to take Jay seriously? Like, is he a threat? Is he a legitimate threat to that title or to any major title he would go after? And then we go to the bottom half of hour two. We finally get into the finals of the women's intercontinental title tournament for the inaugural women's IC title with Lyra Valkyrie taking on Dakota Kai. Now, I got to say, something that caught my attention early on in this was the simple mention of Michael Cole that he mentioned Pat Patterson being the first ever Intercontinental Champion, the men's IC champ. And it just got me to thinking, like, say what you want about this tournament, about the US title tournament, Continental Classic. Say what you want about any of these. At least they're a whole of a hell lot more legit than that tournament that Patterson won in Rio back in the day. Just got to say that. That's what the bloodline come together. Enough with the interview. Yeah, it has been going quite a bit. It really has. But in the case of the women, it is not Pat Patterson. It's Lyra Valkyrie that gets the pin and is our inaugural Intercontinental champ. Not a. I thought they would maybe linger on this just a little bit longer. I mean, these are. I think with both of these women's titles, they're interesting, and the people that they picked are interesting, and not the worst choices to represent those titles. But these championships are very, very much second tier championships based on. I wouldn't want to say who holds them because that's not necessarily been so demeaning towards those performers, but I think the entire presentation of this is just something that's happening much earlier on the card. From there, next up, we closed out hour two with The Miz versus Sami Zayn. And The Miz goes down to a Blue Thunder Bomb. Rare win for Sammy with the Blue Thunder Bomb. The announce team really had to lay into it. A bit of a lull in this match. I would say this was a bit of the time of night where people were transitioning into the night, settling in a little bit. Didn't realize Raw was going to be as short as it was. So I would say this was about the moment where maybe Raw was looking just a little longer than it than I was so desiring at that moment. But again, Sammy's another guy. They got to make sure they keep on track. And that led us into hour three, which opened up with a Rhea Ripley promo. Obviously, Rhea winning the title last week. Big coronation for her, declaring herself that she is back on top. And then she was interrupted by Nia Jax. So last week, it was Hulk Hogan. Hogan is the guy that just had the boos raining down upon him. Now, those boos were not intentional. Hogan did not intend to get those boos. It's just kind of what happened. Nia Jax is sent out here for heel heat, but she's got some heat. She gets booed. Now, by every indication, I think Nia's heat is maybe more akin to the good old Xbox heat or go away heat. People don't like to watch her, so they boo her because they want her to go away. It's not necessarily booing the character that she plays. And she mentioned there's a transfer window and all of this and what she's got to do as champion. Of course, she got cashed in on last Friday, so tough times all around for people. But she called out Bailey, who was in the crowd during the previous IC title match. And Bailey eventually jumped the guardrail, and all three of them were there. And Nia ended up mixing it up with Rhea a little bit and then mixing it up with Bailey, but Bailey and Rhea end up getting the better of Nia. And they even made mention like she was just here, had nothing to do. It was the transfer window, maybe, but maybe people didn't move. I don't know. This was a segment that had again a lot of boos because Nia was just getting booed as she does. Again, don't know how well this really translates into that type of heat, into the type of heat you're looking for to really sell a match. We know what the issues are that people have with Nia, with the reputation she has for working with other people, the perception that she's pushed based on who she's related to, not based on the quality of her work, all of that stuff. And for now, apparently, still a bit of a focus of the women's division. Who do you guys have Rhea facing at Mania now that she's locked in as a champ? And I think even though obviously Tiffany gets a huge pop, it's not like Rhea doesn't, but in the landscape of WWE as the higher echelon champion, I think it's Rhea by a mile. And she's earned it, and she's got the cachet. From there, though, we would find our main event: Damian Priest and Finn Balor cutting, little inset promos. It's time to take care of business. Time to end this. And you got to think. I mean, now we're having Damian Priest versus the Judgment Day. We have Cope on the other show. Cope started the Judgment Day a whole long time ago. I'm gonna say the Judgment Day has to end, but this feuded chapter we need to move on from. In some ways, I think this show could have been a bit of a season finale because it wrapped up a lot of stuff. I was not a fan of maybe the first half of this match, and maybe I was saying not a fan. I don't think it was bad. It was just that kind of boring WWE Street Fight style that they do. A lot of walking and brawling, a lot of that kind of stuff mixed in with high spots. And now I'm saying that, and I'm saying a little bit of a negative because I thought it was a little bit of a bore to start. I think as they would do big moves, the crowd obviously would pop for them. We had this though, and I think this is where it throws off even further on timing, because this match seemed like it was going to end much sooner than it actually did, because they did the double spot off of something into a table, into a drop off of some high spot, and they fell together onto a table and broke the table. And initially, saying maybe they're going to do like a double count out or double KO. Well, the officials came out, Adam Pearce, and everyone's looking real concerned. The match actually ends up continuing. Eventually, the War Raiders come out to even out Carlito and JD McDonough and everyone else that's helping Finn. And you have some pretty big spots. You have the one coup de grace that Finn hit that kind of seemed like it might be it, but Priest ended up getting the win in the end. It felt like a very, very long match. I think it tore through maybe one or two commercial breaks. And when hardcore matches are long, they are really long. Now, there's a lot of people that like these type of matches. I don't want to disparage anyone that really likes these type of matches, but they take a little getting used to, and they're a lot different than a lot of the other matches on the show, especially when they're like this, that there's not really like the blood side of the brutality, so not really that kind of spectacle. It's a lot of just these guys beating each other up, but kind of like I felt last week, even though they went back to it again. This was definitive. Priest got the big win over Finn in the main event after Finn had already lost in his bid to the title. Like, it feels like all of this is over. Obviously, what's going on with Liv and Dominic still has to play out. The Judgment Day itself is not over and still has a lot of fallout. But this basic storyline, we're good. And that was basically our pint-sized Raw from this week. I say pint-sized, 2.5 hours. What a solid days that we're in. Let's see what you got. They're hoping they go back and tell Raquel versus Rhea story at Mania. We wanted for Raquel to win the title before him. Yeah, that stuff she's got is pretty nasty. I don't think her momentum was ever gonna quite seize there to really get the quality, like a quality match out of, or for a quality build with Rhea, like you're hoping for there. Obviously, it would have been great, but just wasn't happening. Let's see if we can see a graphic here for the Royal Rumble, because it is just like a ton of people, and I want to. I want to see. Let's go to the trusted Wikipedia page and see who they have exactly announced as the entrance. There we go. Took a second there. So let's see what we've got on the full declared list. That is the 2024 Rumble. That is why I'm having such a hard time finding that. That is not productive at all. I'm like, well, there's already been eliminations at a Rumble that hasn't happened. All right. According to our trusty friend Wikipedia, we've got LA Knight, John Cena, CM Punk, Jey Uso, Roman Reigns, Seth freaking Rollins, and Drew McIntyre thus far announced for the men's Royal Rumble. So 1, 2, 3. So of those, LA Knight's not winning it. I don't think Jey Uso's winning it. I don't think Seth Rollins or Drew McIntyre is winning it. That would leave Cena, Punk, and Reigns of those three. There can still, there can still be, there can still be a wider field announced. But if they wanna go all in with this, I like it as a hook to just have one of these kind of loaded rumbles. Now you don't need to make it like 40 people or anything like that. Either predictions for, I don't have a prediction for the Rumble. I just want to see what Roman's spot is. I'm dying to know what that is, because prior to him being the guy that was always defeating Kevin Owens on Royal Rumbles, he was the guy who would always get eliminated last for the other guy. How many years in a row was he the second to last guy in the Royal Rumble? Which he's either going to have that, or he's going to have to win the whole dang thing. Which I just can't see that, because what are you gonna do? Him and Cody 3? Like, I don't think so. Yeah, I can't do it with the men's Rumble. I can't with the women's either. Just nothing is super clear to me. There's there's not that much time. There's only a few weeks, but it's kind of a Royal Rumble in that way. I feel like they're gonna have to build from that perspective, and I think building up so much to this past week took away maybe a little bit of where the Rumble build feels a little fast. When is it? February 1st. We still got a couple of weeks. I think it's been given the right amount of time, but we just don't have the clear momentum there. I think kicking off the night, Cena felt like still the person who was sort of at the center of that, but that was also a very Raw centric declaration. I mean, this is one of the last Rumbles ever, right? In Indianapolis after Saudi gets their average Rumble. They used to have the greatest. Now they have a Rumble. Yeah. Charlotte's. I mean, Charlotte comes up probably in the Rumble, I would assume, and she's obviously a threat to win any match she is ever involved in. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, there's some years where like all these guys aren't winning it, but you got some players. You got to see. I mean, see how Saturday night's main event, which I believe is one week before, right? The Rumble. See how that plays into it. We got Roman back on TV that week. Video game coming out. Lots and lots of big things. I think that's gonna do it for us here on the post show, though. I can't believe we're ending this early, but there was a little bit of a smaller edition of Raw. So if you like what you heard, go ahead and hit the subscribe button on this channel, on the Brass Ring Media YouTube channel. Go ahead and check us out on Substack. Go ahead and subscribe to some of our written work, and you can always become a Patreon of our work over at Brass Ring Media. Be sure to do that. Be sure to check us out over here on One True Sport. Tons of new shows going up. You have pretty regular content along with the content they already had. I think our Brass Ring Media invasion has been pretty cool, and you've seen the consistency of shows that has popped up over there. But I think for a Monday night on this truncated evening for January 13th, Penta has debuted. Lyra is the champion, and Raw was a half hour shorter. Good night, everyone.